Hello, my name is Father Kennett, back with you for the third Sunday of Lent, and we're looking at it from the lens of Joseph of Arimathea in our book, Be There. I want to speak a few things and then just offer a few questions to ponder in prayer through the lens of Joseph of Arimathea. On page 14 it says this: "We prioritize work and service while simultaneously devaluing our prayer." How frequently do we see prayer as something that's non-essential or lacking any form of value? I think it's rather easy to prioritize work or service instead of sitting in the presence of God and allowing Him to speak to us or for us to speak to Him. After that paragraph, there's a few things that they offer by way of reflection. And it really is an invitation to look at how we approach prayer. What do we think of prayer? How do we see prayer? And I want to point out four and offer a few brief comments. One of the most frequent things I think we believe about prayer is that prayer is boring. If prayer is boring, then we've miscategorized or misunderstood or misapproached prayer as a whole. If prayer is experiencing God who's infinite, only true, only good, only beautiful, who is perfect love, then we're missing something on our part and not on God's part in the midst of prayer. And so if you honestly think prayer is boring, fair enough, name that with Jesus and ask Him for the grace to see what it is that's in your heart, what's going on in your heart, as to why you believe personally that prayer is boring. I don't hear anything. And I'm going to combine it with another one, that prayer is awkward. Jesus speaks through words, through images, through the scriptures. And in our prayer, I don't think we give Him enough credit or space at times to actually speak to us. It is so true that God can speak to us through images in our prayer. If it's not only an image that's true and good and beautiful, but also speaks personally to us and moves us somehow closer to God and reveals a very specific thing about Him, about us, about what our heart desires, images can be that. Prayer is awkward. One of the reasons I think prayer is awkward is because it's vulnerable. We've spoken about vulnerability before. Vulnerability being exposing what's going on in our heart in a way that's just honest and genuine. Prayer can be very awkward if vulnerability is not something that we want to do or are used to doing. Also, Adam and Eve clung to fig leaves after they recognized that they were naked. And so a part of prayer is just like peeling away these fig leaves that we built up over the course of time and allowing our God to see us for as we truly are, even in the midst of our sinfulness. Last one, prayer is pointless. We don't pray to get something done. We enter into prayer to be in relationship. And from that relationship, things come to pass and eventually unfold and get done. So if this week you typically approach prayer as, I want to pray to get something done, I invite you to just surrender all of that and ask our Lord for the grace to enter into relationship, to see what He has to say, and then act after it, as opposed to presuming what the action ought to be based on assumptions, intuition, whatever it might be. Prayer is not pointless insofar as the point is to enter into relationship. And so if we're approaching it from the stance of being told of what we need to do, or simply concluding that it needs to be for an effective means or purpose, we're missing the mark. That's not how we approach a loved one. Jumping back to Joseph of Arimathea, on page 15, it says, "It is not until after Jesus had suffered and died that Joseph finally made the decision to draw near, offering his own tomb for Jesus' burial." This is where Joseph thought he was personally going to be buried when he had breathed his own last breath. What we see is that he desired to know Jesus, to be with Jesus, and he had this relationship with Jesus that moved him to offer his own tomb to our Lord after our Lord expired and breathed his own last breath. And so think of that moment where Joseph of Arimathea sees Jesus in the arms of Mary. Think of that moment where he recognizes that the Sabbath is coming and he needs to be buried rather quickly because of that circumstance specifically. And then on page 16, to kind of draw it all in and come to a conclusion, he's speaking about seeing Mary and Mary holding Jesus in this moment. It says this at the bottom of page 16. See how he died, with arms wide open. Yes, my son loved that much, Mary's words. Her eyes remained fixed on Jesus, but I knew her words were meant for me, meaning Joseph of Arimathea. My desire to be with him, to be near him, could no longer be denied. I stepped forward. Jesus let himself die so that in the midst of what he experienced with Mary holding Jesus, Joseph's heart would be moved so much in that moment of seeing the Son of Man dying and being held by his mother. It was then that Joseph has this beautiful, profound conversion and recognizes the dignity of not only who Jesus is, but then also, because of that recognition, is exceptionally generous in offering this tomb that he had purchased for himself. The tomb is empty. You can go see Joseph of Arimathea's tomb currently. It's empty. I've been there. If you want to go, you should go. There's no body in there. Joseph's tomb was never supposed to hold the body of Jesus when it was originally purchased. But because Joseph was moved so much by our Lord and Mary holding our Lord, he offered generously his own place of rest. Isn't that an insight? And how we can encounter our Lord in moments that we never theoretically we thought we'd find him. But then also, it's also a lesson in generosity. That our Lord moves our hearts so much that he would actually move our hearts to give something that was intended for us to rest in, for our bodies, that place to be after we have breathed our last breath. But it becomes the sign of all Christian hope, because Joseph of Arimathea's tomb becomes the place of the resurrection of the Christ. I invite you to look at this through the lens of Joseph of Arimathea, to look at your prayer, and to ask our Lord for the grace to be in prayer, in relationship with him, in a dynamic and personal way. Looking forward to next week. Have a blessed third week of Lent.